as Dennis kind of alluded to, we started this program in about 2007. And every year we ask our students, what can we do to try to make this better? Because getting into beekeeping can sometimes be quite a daunting task. I mean, it's scary as hell the first time you walk out and there's 60,000 bugs that can sting you. My job is to sort of alleviate some of those anxieties that you may have and to sort of teach you about the science and the biology of the honeybees so that when you approach your hive and you start working with honeybees, you have the knowledge and you're much more comfortable and prepared. And so after every class finishes, we've asked students, what can we do better to make the next generation of beekeepers, through our program? One of the things they said was, break your lectures up and don't have them on Saturdays. And so now we're here on Sunday afternoon. I hope this is a convenient time for everyone, because it's actually feedback that we got that said, geez, our Saturdays are full of soccer and baseball and other things. And so we shot for a Sunday afternoon. And the other big thing that we're trying this year is to have, as Dennis kind of called them earlier, laboratories. If you think back to when you went through biology in college or in high school, you would often have a little lecture and then you would go into the laboratory and you would do something. Dissect an animal, dissecting here. But the idea is that to give you a really great hands-on experience. And I think by having them Wednesday afternoon kind of evenings, 6:30 to 9 o'clock. The first one is this coming Wednesday in room 414. You'll meet Sarah at that point, and then you'll be able to organize the rest of the whole season after meeting with her. It'll be a great opportunity. It's very low-key, very, I think, informal opportunity for you to spend some time working with honeybees with some supervision before you kind of go off into this one. The outline for today, I was kind of going through the intro first. I think one of the most important things that you can learn when you start keeping bees is really to learn about their biology and their ecology. So the first lecture today, about an hour, will be on the biology and ecology of this one little insect. We'll take a break. My intention is to break every sort of hour to 45 minutes. We'll take 10, 15 minutes, stand up, stretch your legs. If we can get all the way through the third lecture, which is setting up an apiary, great, but I want to respect your time this afternoon and make sure you get out of here on time. So we may just get through the biology and the equipment and then save the third lecture for May 17th, which will be the next time we're together here. The way that I like to have these classes is the first sort of 30 minutes are question and answer. In fact, I can be here as early as 1 o'clock or 12:30 if the class wants to come early and have an hour, just open conversation and Q&A. I'm certainly fine with that. I'm very flexible. Because the homework that you're going to get this week is to go through a whole bunch of catalogs, which are really just beautiful photographs and pictures, and to start thinking about setting up your own apiary. And that oftentimes generates a lot of questions. So we'll email back and forth between now and then, but certainly the Q&A, setting up an apiary and starting a hive will be the next kind of topics to cover. If we can squeak in a talk on the 17th on native pollinators, for years I'd have students that kind of liked the idea of keeping honeybees, so I wasn't really sure if honeybees were for them. They wanted to learn about native pollinators, other things in their garden, how to grow and encourage native pollinators, how do you keep them. And then June 7th will be the last kind of sort of formal lecture that we would have here, and that will cover working with honeybees and pest management. And if we get a chance to get into lecture 8, this is kind of some of my fascinating chance to talk about some new research. The emerging research in bees has got a lot to do with genomics and with gene expression and with proteomics, which I think is just really cool, sort of being a biologist by nature. So kind of looking then long-term into the fall and the winter, so fall of 2015, that's kind of the August, September. We'll do some lectures in kind of late August on how do you harvest honey, how do you extract honey, how do you bottle honey. We'll have a talk on how do you winterize your hive so that the hive that you start this spring survives in the winter next year. And we'll go into hive products, some of the things that beekeepers will often make outside of just honey, but soaps and lotions and candles and all that kind of fun stuff. We'll do hands-on activities. And then the second year hive management will be February of next year. So the intention of this class is for us to sort of spend more or less a calendar year together, meeting periodically to kind of match topics with the biology of the insect, is the intention. And so we're going to get into the first lecture. Now, the general format of our Sunday afternoons together is that I'd like to, you'll have handouts every time you come, and they're just PowerPoint handouts. I, for years, have toyed with the idea of writing this into a book, and I've just never gotten around to it. And it's partially because honeybee research, it continues to evolve, and so my hope is that what you'll see in my slides represents kind of the latest understanding of the biology or the ecology or just even the better sort of understanding of this insect. Whereas if I wrote it into a book and I made copies of it, then the book's outdated in a year or 2 years, and that's kind of pointless. So all of my slides you'll get every week in color, and just feel free to take notes if you have any questions. It'd be great if you could hold them, but if you just, in a lot of cases what will happen is I've had students do this. They'll have a question and I'll say, wait 3 slides because I'm about to get to it, which is great, because that means that you're engaged in the idea. But certainly raise your hand if you have any questions. I certainly don't want to go too fast. But jumping into, as Dennis kind of alluded to, I want to kind of set the stage really about what agricultural extension is, because I'm from Georgia, I'm from the South, a rural area, and so I grew up knowing what extension was. It was just kind of there. But for folks that are kind of from a rural, more urban area, the concept of extension is a little odd, but the extension agency or the extension concept was set up to kind of bridge the gap between academic research and basically farmers, producers. Because the academics were making some really great strides in discoveries, but it wasn't being translated to the producer, to the farmer, and so the extension service kind of makes that bridge. And so what I'll be talking about largely is scientific research, but sort of modified into, hopefully, really applied ideas. And so there's the who we are and what we do. But without going into huge, great details on that, the history of this, so as Dennis mentioned, I'm from Georgia, and that's the University of Georgia's logo. And I went through their beekeeping program while I was in graduate school down there, and I found it a really fascinating learning model. And so when I moved up here, partnered with the Southeast Wisconsin Master Gardener Program, and sort of rolled the honeybees into that. And that's sort of what you're part of this year, is the Urban Apiculture Institute. We're not going to talk about apes. Someone asked me that once. And no, we're not talking about apes, we're talking about honeybees. It happens to be in there. Which is apes. Here's some pictures of those hives that Dennis mentioned earlier that we set up. And the intention was to kind of train beekeepers. As Dennis kind of mentioned, he's the director of the Urban Agriculture Program here, and the Horticulture Program. He's kind of the head of a lot of things, and one of his biggest projects, and I think it's really exciting, is the garden programs, where you can lease garden space. So if you're looking for places to garden, talk to Dennis. He can oftentimes find space for you. This is myself. I'm Harris Byers. I'm your instructor. This is a picture of my dad on the right-hand side. You'll see pictures of him periodically. I'm a 4th generation beekeeper. And so this is something that's been part of our family off and on for many generations. This is a picture down in Georgia. I am finishing my PhD at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in the Department of Geosciences. I'm studying the translocation or the movement of heavy metals into food that we eat, into the tomatoes, into the crops that we eat. At the bottom right-hand corner is a logo from the engineering company that I work for. It's called Stantec. I've given you my email address. I have an extension email address that I don't use, so please don't email me there. Take time just whenever you get a chance. Top right-hand corner is my engineering address. That's the address that goes to my iPhone. Underneath that is my cell number, and underneath that's my home number. And the reason I'm giving you all 3 is because oftentimes if you're working with your honeybees and you see something that causes you concern, you want to ask somebody right then. Pick up the phone and call me. Just be aware that I do have 2 small children, so please don't call late. Because you may not get it. So I do have 2 small children, but I wanted to give you my cell number and my home number just in case you needed to reach out. I wish that we had enough staff to make house calls, to go visit and see the problems that you have, but I'm sorry, we just don't. This is my best attempt to try to bridge that information gap. Oftentimes if you'll take photographs and send me a picture, say I saw this, what does it mean? I can call you right back, or oftentimes get quick answers for you. So again, just take your time, write that down. Linda will be here. I understand she did have some knee surgery, but she'll be part of this class as well. She's a fantastic coordinator for this program. This is a huge class, and I wish we could go around. I really want to get to know everyone, but just kind of maybe in the break, talk to your next door neighbor, introduce yourselves amongst yourselves, and really kind of describe why you want to take this class, because I think it's kind of crazy that people want to work with 60,000 stinging insects. I've done it just because that's all I've kind of grown up knowing, but I think it's fascinating that we still can get this sort of assemblage together year after year. You know, looking at beekeeping in 2015, the picture on the left is kind of a grandfatherly gentleman who's sort of teaching a young child something. I want to drop some light so hopefully you can see these slides a little better. Please don't go to sleep. And so classically, this is the way beekeeping was taught, is you would learn from a family member. And you got a cute kid on the right-hand side, because now the next generation that's sort of coming through is picking up beekeeping, but they're picking it up from a variety of different areas. I mean, certainly us, we certainly can help fill that gap if you don't have a family member that's knowing it. But the picture of beekeeping in 2015 is way different. If you just look around this room, we've got really a variety of age groups, a variety of backgrounds, and I think it's fascinating because it's a topic that can kind of bring lots of people, different kind of people together. I kid you not, one year I was giving a talk here, and there was a picture of something written in Sanskrit, and one of the people in our class raised her hand and interpreted for us. And I thought, well, what's the chance that someone in a classroom is going to be able to read Sanskrit? Oh, it just fascinates me to no end that we get such a diverse community that can come through and contribute to our classes every year. Kind of getting into the real meat of the topic. The first slide I like to show in every talk that I give is what really bees are not. And I'm skipping over the talk on the syllabus. That's still kind of fluid. I'll get back to you on that one. But what bees are not. So oftentimes we'll have people call up or send pictures, and they'll often be confused, especially in the fall. Just a warning, when people kind of figure out that you're becoming a beekeeper, you're going to get a lot of questions. And you're going to have people bringing you things. Is this a bee? Is this a bee? I want to give you a first slide of what bees are not. These are common members of the vespid group, or the wasp group that we have in Wisconsin. So if you see the paper nests up in trees, that's not a honeybee nest, obviously. These insects on the right and to the bottom, these are all vespids. These are all wasps. And wasps are definitely different than honeybees. And I think one of the challenges of beekeepers is to sort of educate the community that these are not honeybees. These are the wasps that will irritate your picnics, that will do various things to you that honeybees will not. And I think this is the confusion that's often led to honeybees being blamed for a lot of problems. I'm going to compare and contrast the two. On the left-hand side are the honeybees, the right-hand side are the wasps, or the vespids, if I call them that, to give you a sense of what the honeybees are compared to wasps. So honeybees are strict vegetarians. They eat no meat. Their protein source, or their source of nitrogen in their diet, is pollen. Their carbohydrate source is honey that they've made from nectar that they've gathered from plants. That's their diet. Two things: pollen and a carbohydrate source, nectar or honey. There are cells that the honeybees sort of live in, and again, it's not that honeybees, the adults, live in these cells. The cells are made of extruded wax. Wax is a complex carbon chain that gets made in the workers of honeybees, and this wax gets extruded from these glands on the underside of the abdomen. I'll show you some pictures later. It's really kind of cool. As compared to the wasps are omnivores. They'll eat your ham sandwich, they'll eat your watermelons, and they'll drink your Coca-Cola. The wasps also make their cells out of collected, and then again, quote-unquote, paper. It's a cellulose product that the wasps sort of more or less forage for. They don't make that themselves. Comparing the last two, and I think this is one of the fundamental points between the two groups, for honeybees, and especially for those in this class that are maybe starting to keep bees, maybe on the small scale, you'll have 1 or 2 hives, or 3. The queen and the workers that are living in your hive, the whole group overwinters. When I say overwinter, that means they don't die. They don't go away in the wintertime. They're still alive and they're still in their hive. Whereas the queens in the wasp family overwinter. All the workers are dead. Oftentimes you'll see, especially kind of late winter, early spring, you'll find these paper wasp nests. They'll just be decimated from the woodpeckers. They've just gone after them in the wintertime. They eat anything that's left inside. Right, so the only way for that sort of group of insects to continue every year is that the fact that queen has overwintered. She typically goes into the ground to overwinter. The next slide is just really, really critical. Honeybees are not domesticated. I'm giving you some pictures of common domesticated things. Certainly cows and sheep and chickens, and we've domesticated them. And we've done a fairly good job at domesticating most of the vegetable crops and fruit crops, but honeybees are not domesticated. They're a wild insect. They're just as wild today as their ancestors. Now, we granted have, as agricultural entities, tried to breed desired traits, and we'll talk about what some of those traits are. But they're still wild. They'll still sting, and yes, it hurts when you get stung, even after this many years later. So these are by and large, they are the most important group of flower pollinators. They are guided by sight and smell. And so if you're thinking about your own gardens and you're thinking about the colors and the textures of flowers that you have in your garden, honeybees see flowers that are yellow and blue. That's typically the flower that they get primarily attracted to. Yellow and blue things. Not red. Notice that, not red. Notice the yellow and blue, right? Just be with me here, it's a Sunday afternoon. Not red. Now, flowers have this really interesting sort of coevolution, you could argue, features called honey guides and bee landing platforms. Now I'm going to show you a picture on the bottom right-hand corner. You may already have seen the picture in your notes, so try not to read ahead too far. So on the left-hand side is a dandelion, that you and I would see it, bright yellow flower. On the right-hand side is how that dandelion looks to a honeybee under sort of the ultraviolet spectrum. The thought amongst biologists is that, well, these honey guides are trying to attract the attention of an insect, number one, that's really small, with compound eyes, that's flying through its environment. And what this dandelion is trying to do is to say, honeybee, come down here, and come to this very specific spot. Don't come to my leaves, don't come to the outer edges of my flower. Come here, because this is where you're going to get your nectar. And kind of, on the other hand, this is where pollination will take place. So the plant's trying to attract an insect, and it's really expending quite a bit of energy to do that. And the whole reason is pollination, and that's the core of the idea of honeybees and beekeeping. It all kind of folds into pollination. So pollination is extraordinarily important to us, as Dennis alluded to earlier, and I think this is a number that gets thrown around, but I think it's quite true, that about a third of our diet is directly or indirectly dependent on insect-pollinated plants. And typically, for modern agriculture, that insect is the honeybee. So I had a group of middle school students recently that I helped with a project, and this was sort of the core of their idea. And so I had them start saying, well, what did you have for breakfast today? Oh, well, let's see. I had orange juice, insect pollinated, right? Orange juice. One of them, I asked them what they have for lunch, and she kind of shyly admitted that she'd gone to Culver's for fried chicken. I said, okay, great, fried chicken. So that chicken, chances are, ate soybeans possibly in its diet. Soybeans, insect pollinated. So it's kind of, you start thinking about the food web that we have as people, and oftentimes right in the core of that food web is a little tiny insect that you're going to learn a tremendous amount about. Bottom picture, if you've never seen cotton before, this is cotton. And cotton, just because I'm from Georgia, I have to put a little tiny nod to where I'm from. Cotton is honeybee pollinated, so the clothes that you have on your body is largely due to an insect that has pollinated that cotton. It's made a bowl that's then been processed and turned into your clothing. So insects are just extraordinarily important, especially honeybees. Just a real quick word about pollen, in case you've never really thought about this. Pollen is a multi-shaped flower part. So the shape and the form is related to how it's pollinated. So the pollen that's sticky and barbed, well, those barbs and those protrusions are to kind of stick to something, right? So like a honeybee that's landing, or it could be a bat, or it could be a butterfly. Any animal that's doing that pollinating, the pollen from the plant that it's sort of doing that transfer for is going to be barbed and sticky. Whereas something that's wind pollinated, in other words, pollen's just blown around by the wind, say for example corn, it's going to be light and small and smooth. So you can imagine how difficult this would be for the wind to blow around, more or less, because it's kind of this odd shape and it's just not really efficient. The wind-pollinated species are lightweight. So a couple of years ago, I had students that were thinking about starting bees, and they were going to put their bees in the cornfield because, hey, it's an agricultural field. I said, well, geez, that's not really great. Honeybees don't really care about corn. That's not what they're interested in. They might get a little marginal pollen if they're lucky, but there's no nectar for them in cornfields. And so that student kind of rethought their idea. So here's some great pictures of honeybees, which of course you'll see quite a few of. So this is a picture of honeybee. Now I'm kind of giving you the Latin name at the bottom, but kind of to the right-hand side, I want to point something out. There's great debate, and oftentimes over a beer or two, amongst the biologists and entomologists about honeybees and whether or not honeybees and some of the native pollinators compete with each other. Depends on who you're having beers with as to the answer you'll get. But notice what I've written down here is that they are an alien species to the United States. The honeybees is